Very good. Excuse me. All right, let's call the Public Works and Utilities Committee for June 22nd, 2020 to order. Ms. Martin, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Chair, Councilor Christopher Rivera.
Here.
Councilor Ramona Beta.
Here.
Councilor Signe Lindell.
Here.
Councilor Joanne Vijo Koppler.
Here.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Present.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next is approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff, John?
No, Mr. Chair.
Anything from you, Shannon?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
All right, what are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion for approval of the agenda by Councilor Lindell, a second by Councilor Beta. Any further discussion? Hear none, see none. Can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Chair, Councilor Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Councilor Ramona Beta.
Yes.
Councilor Signe Lindell.
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vijo Koppler.
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next is approval of the consent agenda. Any changes from staff? Shannon,
We have no changes, Mr. Chair, thank you.
anything from you, John?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right, anything the committee would like to pull, committee members would like to pull? Start with Councilor Beta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item G and item I.
G and I. All right, is there anything, let's go next to Councilor Lindell.
Item K, please.
G and I and K so far. All right, Councilor Vijo Koppler.
Yes, Mr. Chair, item E, G, H, I.
Can you say that again? G, H?
E, G, H, I.
All right, Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull items D and I. So D is in dog for confirmation.
All right, so thank you for that. So far, we have items D, E, G, H, I, K, and M. Is that correct? Did I leave anything off?
Mr. Chairman, who pulled item M?
M was pulled by Councilor Garcia, I believe. Is that correct, Councilor?
No, just item D is in dog and I is in ice cream.
D and I, okay, I'm sorry. All right, so item M is not pulled, D and I.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. All right, anything else or anything that I missed? All right, what are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve as amended.
Motion for approval is amended. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion for approval is amended by Councilor Vijo Koppler, a second by Councilor Lindell. Can we have a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Chair, Councilor Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Councilor Ramona Beta.
Yes.
Councilor Signe Lindell.
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vijo Koppler.
Yes,
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And then sorry, I'm getting used to this Prime Gov. So next is approval of the minutes from the June 8th, 2020 Public Works and Public Utilities Committee meeting. Any changes from staff, John?
No, Mr. Chair.
Anything from you, Shannon?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right, anything from the committee? What are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
second,
Motion for approval by Counselor Vihil Coppler, a second by Counselor Lindell. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please? Ms.
Yes,
Martin?
sir. Yes, sir. Chair, Counselor Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Ramon Abeyta,
Yes.
Counselor Signa Lindell,
yes,
Counselor Joanne Vihil Coppler,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So the first item I'm sorry, next is item 6, public comment. Anything from you, Ms. Pisula?
Hi, Mr. Chair. Yes, I did receive a letter regarding vehicular noise around the plaza, and there was a comment made on Prime Gov in relation to item I. Would you like me to read the letter first or item I?
Do the letter first and then item I.
Sure. The constituent writes, I am writing to tell you about the unfortunate situation downtown that is keeping people away. The traffic noise is unbearable. My husband and I have enjoyed shopping, eating, and strolling downtown until this year. The motorcycle and car noise is incredibly offensive, and after 3 bad experiences in a row, we've decided not to go downtown for any reason anymore, especially since our last experience on the plaza included intimidation by an armed motorcyclist. We have several sets of friends visiting late last summer and in autumn, and we plan to tell them to stay far away from the plaza as possible. In the past, we recommended that friends and family stay downtown, but now we couldn't do that in good conscience. I wonder if Santa Fe has a noise ordinance, and if so, I would like to know why it isn't being enforced. Since the noise ordinance, if it exists, obviously isn't being enforced, please close the roads along the plaza so that locals and visitors alike can once again enjoy our beautiful and historic downtown neighborhoods, restaurants, and shops. And then in regards to item I on Prime Gov, the constituent writes, I think traffic distribution for patrons trying to get to La Fonda and the businesses in that complex needs to be evaluated. I imagine some of the traffic now uses San Francisco Street, and if that gets closed, all that traffic will need to travel down Water Street or come from antiquated signalized intersections at Old Santa Fe Trail and East Alameda. And if special events are allowed at La Fonda during this closed period, that additional traffic would adversely affect the signalized intersection. Also, what about emergency response vehicles access for incidents on the plaza, which would increase with the current increased tensions resulting from Mayor Weber's rushed decisions about Hispanic Native American relations. Finally, many people, locals and tourists who visit the plaza may not be physically able to walk from a parking lot to the plaza. So this closure would exclude them from being able to take in the sights of the plaza or the incredible view of the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi at the end of San Francisco Street if the closure takes effect. And that is all.
Thank you, Ms. Pessoa. Anything from you, Ms. Diaz?
Mr. Chairman, there's no public comment from me.
Thank you. So we're on to our consent agenda. Item D, I believe, is the first item that was pulled off, and it was pulled off by Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Due to a potential conflict of interest, I'm going to recuse myself from this item. So I'll go ahead and step out of action on this item, and then if you wouldn't mind, just let me know when action is taken and I can rejoin the meeting.
Very good, thank you. All right, so Councilor Garcia pulled this to recuse himself. Did any of the other members have questions?
move to approve,
Second.
Motion for approval of item D by Counselor Lindell, a second by Counselor Abeyta. Any further discussion? See none or hear none. So could we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Counselor Ramon Beta,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
yes,
Counselor Joanne Vihel Coppler,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
He's recused himself.
He's recused, I'm sorry. Chair, Counselor Christopher Rivera.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Let's give Counselor Garcia a couple minutes to rejoin. Joe, will you let me know when he's back? I'm using my phone for video, so it's limited on the number of people I can see.
Got it. I'll look now. Counselor, I gotta let him in. I'm gonna take the hosting from you real quick.
Okay.
Okay, he's back.
All right, welcome back, Counselor Garcia. We're on to item E, which was pulled by Counselor Vihel Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. One is this this CARES money in the amount of $361,227 is that, I guess the question would be for either, for probably Alexandra Ladd. Would we not have gotten those funds if we weren't doing the Midtown project?
The funds are entitled to us through our CDBG grant. So we can use those funds for any way that meets the criteria that HUD has set out, specifically related to offsetting the health impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, so related to that, is there, if we weren't using those funds for the Midtown project, is there anything else that maybe we're foregoing by using these funds for the project rather than, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's nothing else we would use these funds for.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihel Coppler, the funds are quite limited in their focus, which is to look to address specific health impacts. So right now, because that's exactly what we're doing with the Midtown campus, there was an easy way to immediately well, not immediately, but quite effectively and efficiently deploy the funds versus having to set up an RFP process to look for a different project that was doing the kind of work that the funds are designed to do.
Okay, and then is it still the case where when we receive federal funds from HUD, we have to comply with equal employment opportunity guidelines, or that's not a requirement?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihel Coppler, we always have to comply with federal laws when it comes to dispersing federal funds. But in this case, we're not using the funds to pay for internal staff. So that requirement wouldn't necessarily apply to the direct disbursement of the funds for this project.
Well, the reason I ask is because, you know, there have been some recent complaints, one of them being sexual harassment that was reported in the newspaper, and equal employment opportunity covers sex. So that would mean, I just wondered if we had to report that. And
Uh,
it
Couns-
doesn't have to be an employee.
Mr. Chair, Counselor Vihel Coppler, the funds are not deployed yet. So any of the city's current laws and current procedures would be in effect. And the funds don't change any of that specific to a complaint against a city employee. You know, I'm not super familiar with the situation. Director Wheeler may be able to provide some insight, and she's on the call, so I'll let her answer that if there's any information to add.
Thank you, Chairman, Councilor Vihel Coppler, and Director Ladd. I actually don't have any more information on that at all. I haven't seen the complaint. I haven't participated in the process yet. I don't think it's actually begun. And I don't know how it interacts with the grant, although like Director Ladd said, the grant funds are not in use yet. So that occurred in the past before the grant funds were used, and the grant funds will not be used to hire city staff, to pay for city staff.
Well, you know, I don't mean to belabor the point, but I want to say it again. When you receive federal funds, because I worked at the Human Rights Commission, and I know, and then I worked closely in that job with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So it's not necessary, and I teach sexual harassment courses. So it's not necessarily an employee involved. It's when there's an allegation, it doesn't necessarily have to be the employee. The kicker is it's the organization's responsibility to investigate. And because this is our program, I just, you know, I hope that there is an investigation going on, and I will follow up on that. But on the other hand, I remember that there were reporting requirements, and I realize we haven't used the funds yet, but we're well on our way. And if this is not something that's required of this money, then it's okay for you to say that, because things could have changed. But I'm familiar with organizations who get federal funds, and that's always a requirement to on their honor, they'll comply with the Equal Employment Opportunity guidelines and laws. So I agree with the program. I agree with the funds, but this allegation does concern me, and there's more that needs to be done other than what it appears we're doing. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, Councilor Vihel Coppler. Do you have anything to add, Ms. Ladd?
Well, I think the only thing I would add is anything that's currently required by the city to investigate this is still in effect. I mean, it's not the acceptance of these funds, which hasn't happened yet, doesn't affect the city's response to this situation.
And I'm sure many people are probably not privy to the investigation itself, but it sounds like it is occurring. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairman, I'm aware that HR is conducting the investigation.
Very good. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Vihel Coppler, a second from Councilor Beta. Any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vihel Coppler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chairman Councilor Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Now we're on to item G, which was pulled by both Councilor Beta and Councilor Vihel Coppler. Councilor Beta, you have the floor first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item has been seen by the Public Works Committee before. We made a recommendation to the Finance Committee of approval of the projects. And then at Finance Committee, there was an amendment regarding the public safety radio system replacement. And The finance committee felt that it was important that it be brought back to this committee first so that this committee could take a look at that and then make another recommendation to the finance committee. So I just wanted to inform the committee that that was the case. I see Mr. Romero's memo is in the packet and it talks a little bit about the public safety radio system. And so I don't know if Mr. Romero wants to give us more information than what's in the packet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Beta. Mr. Romero, is there anything you would like to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor Beta gave a really good summary of why it's back in front of the Public Works Committee. The additional money for the radio project, $556,000, would go to a CAD system, a computer-aided dispatch system that's needed to implement that new radio system, as well as certain capital improvements additional capital improvements within the project itself. So we're looking to add $556,000 to that budget. What that does to the overall project savings that can be utilized for capitalizable operating expenses, it brings it down to about $6.5 million.
Very good, thank you. Councilor Vihel Coppler, you also pulled this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted, Councilor Abeyta did discuss finance, but I wanted to have a little bit more in-depth idea of why the radio system, what led to that, and not that I disagree. And then from Mr. Romero, is this 556,000 gross receipts? I know you have the color-coded chart, and so, but I didn't really find it, and I was running out of time. So, I found the chart, but I couldn't really see it. So, is it this gross receipts money, or is this from bonds, or where is this money?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihel Coppler, so I can definitely understand how all this color of money can get confusing at times. This is from bond money.
Okay.
The money that we're shaking loose is either proceeds from the 2018 GRT bond sale. There's also a few older projects that utilized money from earlier bonds, cash left over from earlier bonds. One of them in particular is the fire station design. That one, there was $135,000 left in that project that was from older GRT bond revenue. So that $135,000 is a portion of the 6.5, or you can consider it a portion of the 556. In any event, they're all GRT bond projects. I apologize. I think I made it more long-winded than it needed to be.
Okay, I liked your explanation of the color of money. Councilor Abeyta, I wanted to get a sense, and again, not that I disagree, but what was the discussion in finance? Because we've gone over all of this many times in many meetings, as you mentioned, and now it's come up to change it a bit. Can you explain some of the sentiment about it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilwoman Vihel Coppler. We were ready to approve the projects list as recommended by Public Works, but then we were told about this at that meeting, about this change with the radio dispatch. And so again, we didn't feel comfortable not approving it without it coming back here first, because this really falls within the purview of this committee and not the finance committee. And so we felt that if there's going to be any changes to the list that was presented to us, that list needs to come back to Public Works first.
Thank you. I was wondering though, is there some sort of emergency that was brought up regarding this, or what exactly was the impetus?
Councilwoman Vihel Coppler, I believe the negotiations with the county and the regional dispatch center and some of the agreements, I think that's what was explained to us at Finance Committee, that as part of these negotiations, if there's something that we could present that we're willing to commit to, that may help with that. But I don't know if Ms. McSherry's still on the line. She may want to explain that better than I just did.
Councilor Vihil Coppler, if I can interject here, I know that the fire chief pulled money from the radio system to help out with the funding for the new fire station. And since we're not doing that part of it, I think he realized that there are probably parts of the radio system that he absolutely needed to have and kind of underestimated. So if that helps out at all.
That does help. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm good with that, unless Ms. McSherry wants to add anything.
Chairperson Rivera, Councilor Vihil Coppler, I would just say that the city is obligated to pay certain costs, and so it's just a matter of which funding source. And so I think because our operating costs are so restricted right now, that because there now is more funding available, that we're trying to use these other funds for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure thing. Any other questions from the committee? What are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion for approval from Councilor Vihil Coppler, a second from Councilor Lindell. Any further discussion? Hear none or see none. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, sir. Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Sidney Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vihil Coppler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Councilor Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next, we're on to item H, which was pulled by Councilwoman Vihil Coppler.
Okay, thank you. So it is a little bit, it's sort of confusing, I think, to the public about item H and I, because there's a little bit, there's some difference, but with regard to item H, oh, and I guess I should mention the email amended resolution that we just got, that doesn't apply to H, right? It applies to I. I'll just ask that before I start.
I believe that's correct, but Jesse, do you want to confirm that?
Mr. Chair, councilors, yes, the amendment that was emailed to you and that is posted on the Legislative Services website is for item I, not for item H.
Okay, and so I just want to reiterate, because it's been just a bit, I mean, I did read this again, but this expires October 31st, and this is this is the one that's aimed at restaurants who have an alcohol beverage license that allows them to serve alcohol on the streets, and that they barricade, you know, the boundaries of where alcohol can be served. And that is solely pretty much for restaurants. Am I right? Item H.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, yes, that is correct.
Okay, and I didn't find in there much about what streets are closing, and that's something I want to know, what streets. I did walk downtown not long ago and I saw some restaurants out in the street, but we haven't approved this yet, so I'm not sure what that's about at all. I don't know if the city's just looking the other way, or I don't really know, but there are some restaurants already doing it. But I want to know what streets, because I don't believe I read anything that says what streets. And I also want to know about a traffic pattern study, whether that was done.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, item H pertains to more than just dining on closed streets. It pertains to even dining in parklets, which we have been approving. They have been coming through my office, so anyone that does want to utilize city right of way that does not necessitate closing an entire street, we've been permitting those. And so item H, allowing alcohol service not only provides for those that would be in a closed street, it provides for those that are adjacent to an open street, whether they're in a parking area, parking aisle, parkway between the curb and gutter and the sidewalk, or a portion of a very large sidewalk that they're using.
Can you give me an example of where in this city that would be?
Yes, so one of the current approved permits is for the Inn of the Anasazi. In front of the Inn of the Anasazi, it's a very large area. And so they're able to use a portion of our right of way while still leaving 5 feet of sidewalk available for people to pass through their property frontage.
Okay, and then what parking lots?
Parking spaces, so.
Parking spaces?
Yes, I don't think we've approved any of those yet, but we want to allow them to utilize parking space. If there's not a whole lot of sidewalk and or buffer between the sidewalk and the curb and gutter, we want to make available city-owned parking stalls.
Oh, that was my next question. So like Water Street parking, would that be dining?
No, it's metered parking stalls, on-street parking, no off-street parking facilities. So anything that's within the roadway right of way.
And
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler.
I guess I missed it. But just a second, Randy,
I'm sorry.
Is that all in here? That parking, metered parking and all that? I didn't see that.
So I believe what item H is referring to is allowing alcohol service on city-owned right-of-way. And it doesn't designate how my office approves the use of the right-of-way. It just says if they're allowed to use our right-of-way for dining, that we then allow them also to serve alcohol if they follow ABC alcohol, they have an alcohol license.
Okay, and I presume that your office is ready, or would this be land use where they get the permits? You said it was your office, right?
Yes, so there are two different ways they can permit additional dining. If they wanted to do it on site, say they own their own parking lot and they wanted to utilize that area, they would work through land use to permit that. If it's anything on the street in the roadway right away that the city owns, which includes sidewalk and curb and gutter and parking stalls, that comes through my office through an obstructions of streets permit.
Okay, and while this is all going on, who's going to pick up the trash? Is the business responsible for it, or are we?
The business.
Okay, and that's already in permitting process, is that right? Or is that in this resolution?
Well, so it's an
ordinance, sorry.
It's not explicitly written, Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, but it's something that we will monitor. And of course, if there is something that's occurring that is not in keeping with what we need to happen on our public right of way, we do have the authority to revoke their permit.
Okay, so can this happen anywhere in the city?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, yes.
So any restaurant that wishes to serve alcohol under item H and use their own parking lot or use city streets, this can happen anywhere.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, yes, it can be applied for anywhere in the city. Just because they apply doesn't mean we approve it. We look at many different things to see if it's feasible. But yes, it could arguably be approved anywhere in the city.
Well, that's different. Okay. So right now, I guess you wouldn't really have a traffic study because you're just talking about alcohol and parking spaces and parking, private business parking lots. Is that right?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, again, all H is really doing is allowing the sale of alcohol. It's not determining how the city designates these areas that we allow them to dine in. The next item does touch on that, and it's specific to closure of streets. The allowing of use of right-of-way that does not necessitate the closure of a street, we've been doing administratively through an obstruction of streets permit, which is allowed under Chapter 23 of City Code.
Okay, so the general public may be seeing alcohol be served, provided they get approved, anywhere in the city in parking spaces or private parking lots. Maybe even if they get approval, well, I don't know where we would find a city lot, but this could happen anywhere. So is there going to be some public notice of this thing so we don't get a bunch of complaints of people drinking alcohol in a parking lot?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, Councilor Vihil Coppler, Randy could probably touch on this more, but these areas that we're allowing them to dine in, the rules that are required by the state for this extended alcohol service, they have to have the area corded off with fencing. And so it's an obvious, the way it would look, it looks like an obvious extension of that business. And it won't just be random people walking like they do on the Las Vegas Strip. It's going to look like it's part of that business. It's going to be controlled. And it's almost no different than, I guess, well, if you go out in front of the Anasazi, it's a really good example of how controlled the area is and how it does look like an extension of the restaurant's patio.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, if I could just add, the state has most of the rules that relate to alcohol service, and the area has to be adjacent, contiguous to where the permit is held, and it can only be a maximum of 25% of whatever their current floor plan is approved for alcohol service. So if they have 400 square feet approved for alcohol service, the maximum addition can be 25%. And that is just until October 31st as well. So that's why this change ties into the state alcohol changes.
Well, I'm thinking about businesses like along Sirius Road, that restaurants that are there that maybe, I mean, could reasonably fall under this as well and block off some parking spaces in front of their restaurant and serve dinner and alcohol or whatever. As you said, Mr. Randall, if they comply. Is that reasonable to think that could occur?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, this particular bill would not apply to that because that would be on private property as opposed to the city streets. This is only dealing with city property. But yes, they could potentially expand 25% out. And that is what Mr. Romero was suggesting would be approved through land use because it's a change of use of private property as opposed to this one that applies to the city-owned property.
Well, I guess what I was thinking, why I was asking that is because earlier I asked if this could happen anywhere in the city. So I was thinking of places that it could happen. And so maybe it does become a land use permit issue, but it would be for the same reason. And so would we be putting ourselves in treating one restaurant differently than the other just because they're not downtown? I hope and especially because there's going to be two departments deciding these. So I hope we don't start pitting downtown restaurants versus South Side restaurants and not let them do the same thing, because alcohol increases your gross profit. So I don't know any restaurant why they wouldn't do this. And they're all experiencing the same thing with this pandemic, loss of revenue. So I really hope that the Public Works talks to planning and land use and that we treat our restaurants the same. That's
Mr. Chair, Councilor, I think that was the very reason that this could apply anywhere. And it's so that it is not just for downtown. You're exactly right. Every restaurant is running into the same 50% reduction of capacity, and they need this extra space. Plus, it's been proven that the public is far more comfortable being in an outdoor space than an indoor space at this point. They feel safer. So it can apply anywhere where a restaurant is adjacent to city-owned property, be it a sidewalk or a parking space.
Okay, but nevertheless, it all expires October 31st on Halloween. Great night, great big alcohol night. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions on item H? All right, what are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve. Move to
Second.
approve.
So a motion for approval and a second. I think it was Councilor Beta. Any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Amana Beta,
Yes.
Counselor Signy Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Joanne Vihel Coppler,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Counselor Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we're on to item I, which was pulled by Councilor Garcia and Councilor Abeyta. Councilor Garcia, why don't you take a shot at it first?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So trying to go over these amendments, I mean, I didn't even get the email. I think that was sent to the other councilors. I'm having to pull them up last minute. But from what I'm able to see, and there was lots of recommendations made at the Quality of Life Committee meeting. What I'm not seeing included is specific language to keep one street on the plaza open continuously. And so I see something in an amendment, I think it's item 10 on the proposed amendments, 10 or 10.9. And it's referencing it in the cruise night. But I don't see where there was an amendment made to keep one street continuously open. Can somebody, Jesse, can you point me out where that change might have been made?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, let me let me open it up. Councilor Lindell has her hand up.
Chair, I'm not seeing the amendments in my Prime Gov packet. Can someone direct me?
Mr. Chair, councilors, they were not uploaded, but I did email them to you.
Okay, so I only see the
And
amendment
Mr.
made
Chair-
by Councilor Villarreal and have no other amendments in my possession. So this is a bit frustrating that I have no copies of amendments and we're expected to review this in real time during the committee. How are we supposed to provide quality input and move this forward? I mean, with that being said, I feel like recommending to table this action to give us time to review this. So I'm putting forth the recommendation, we table this item. I make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion for tabling. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Further discussion? Before we decide on tabling, Jesse, do we know why this came to us so late?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, we were still working on finalizing the language to make sure that we had everything accurate. And in discussions with Aaron and Randy and John, we felt that because we had item 9 said at least one street bordering the plaza shall be accessible to vehicular traffic. That would apply to all times.
All right, Randy, what's the danger of, is there any danger of tabling and then having it come back?
Mr. Chair, if you, I guess I don't know the answer, Aaron. If you table, since Quality of Life has approved this, it would seem to me it would move on to council on Wednesday. Or would
Randy,
table it blocking it?
Mr. Chair, Randy, Councilor Garcia, it is on the agenda for governing body tomorrow, and only one committee needs to give a recommendation to proceed for it to be discussed on governing body. So governing body would have the opportunity to decide whether they wanted to hear it or not. There's another resolution already on the books that requires one street to be open on the plaza. And this resolution doesn't seem to overrule that resolution. Or it requires, Jesse, correct me, what is the specific language there? Do you have it in front of you?
Are you talking about the 2014 resolution?
Correct.
It actually says all 4 streets, but 4 cruise nights specifically.
Okay. So maybe not.
If I may, Councilor Villarreal in her amendment wanted to make sure that we did keep at least one street along the plaza open at all times, and not just during cruise nights, but at all times, regardless of other street closures.
Can you point that out to me, Jesse? Because I don't think I see it in Councilor Villarreal's amendments, proposed amendments. You know what item it is?
Mr. Chair, I have a point of order. There's a motion to table, and I think we should probably act on that because it looks like we're going to start discussing this.
Well, we had a motion and now we're in the discussion phase of it. Do we have anything to discuss via tabling it or about tabling it? So if you're going to get into specifics, Councilor Garcia, we probably should take the vote. If it's a discussion specifically to the motion to table, we can have that discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope the other councilors share my frustration in regards to getting this information to us during the meeting, not an hour before, not 24 hours before, prior to what happened last time. This is during the meeting. How are we expected to provide quality input and produce quality policy if we're getting this information during the meeting? I find it unfortunate that we have to act upon it, that if we table it, then we can't change it. And I think there are plenty of changes that still need to be made to this. So with that, I'm going to recall my motion. Just in the sense, I think there's a lot of changes that need to be made to this that weren't made. And I would like to, once again, get a copy of the amendment that got sent out, because I do not have those. I don't even have the amendments that were sent out to the rest of the committee. All I have is the amendments that Councilor Villarreal submitted that are part of the packet.
Okay, so we have the rescinded motion. Is that okay with the second as well?
I'm okay with it, but Mr. Chair, could you review what exactly we have? Because I have Mr. Guillen's email that we got after this meeting started with Councilor Villarreal's extensive amendments. Are there other amendments that I'm not seeing?
Jesse, can you cover the amendments? I believe the only ones that were sent out were Councilor Villarreal's amendments. I think she and Jesse have probably compiled all the discussion items that we had on quality of life. But Jesse, if you can address that.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, councilors, the email that I sent to you after Aaron had reviewed the language in the amendments are the only amendments to this resolution. There are no other amendments.
So those are the only amendments to the sheet right now. So Councilor Payta, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to support the motion to table this because I share the same concerns as Councilor Garcia and Councilor Vihel Coppler by seconding the motion. But if it's withdrawn and we want to hear it, or we're going to hear it, then that's fine. But I have the same concerns as the other committee members.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Lindell, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think my question was the same as Councilor Vihel Coppler's. I just got, same for Councilor Garcia. We were left off the email with the amendment, so we didn't get the amendments. Even though they were sent after the meeting started, we still didn't get them. And I heard someone reference that there was already an amendment in the packet, which I didn't have an amendment in my packet. So just to clarify, I just received an email with an amendment brought forward by Councilor Villarreal. Is there another amendment that I should be considering?
Jesse?
Sure, Councilor, the amendment that you received in your email are the only amendments to this resolution.
So it is one amendment.
No.
It's one
It's
sheet
proposed,
that contains
proposed
multiple
amendment.
amendments.
I'm sorry, say again, please.
Sure, Councilor, it's one amendment sheet that contains multiple amendments on that sheet.
Okay. Thank you.
There are 10
I would have
amendments.
voted, I would have also voted to table this. I have no ability to look at 10 amendments back into the text of what is being proposed. I can do that between now and council, but I can't do it from 4 minutes ago and make an informed vote on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilor John Romero, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I do understand the frustration for the lateness of getting this material. And I'd like to personally apologize. It was not Jesse, nor was it Aaron. They had amendments prepared for my review on Friday evening. And I didn't review it this weekend. In fact, I was out of town for Father's Day, so I apologize for that. I did get to it on Monday, and this afternoon, I got to him late this afternoon, so I'll take full responsibility for receiving this material late. That being said, before it's postponed, I do believe, there's multiple amendments, but I think it's very quick to read and to go over. And if possible, if Jesse could share a screen, show those amendments, we could all look on our screen, see what they're like, and you can make a decision on if it's too much information to digest within the next few minutes. If not, I understand you wanting to postpone it, but again, I would like to take full responsibility for it.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Councilor Vihel Coppler, you have your hand up.
Mr. Chair, before we get started, if Jesse is going to share the screen, I just want someone to answer the question that Councilor Garcia had, and that is there amendment in that whole list, because I didn't read them yet, is there an amendment in that whole list that leaves open one street continuously?
Jesse?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, the idea behind number 8 on the list, the last one, is that there would be one street.
I can't hear you very well, Jesse. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, Councilor, the intent behind number 8 on the amendment sheet, or not the amendment, number 10, I guess, 10. The last change on the amendment sheet is to leave one street open continuously. If you'd like to suggest a change to that to make it clear in some way, that is certainly an option.
Well, I guess we can decide what street we want that to be. I mean, we could even amend it to that. Am I right? I guess so. I think that's the biggest thing the public is concerned about. So. All right.
Mr.
Thank
Chairman,
you. Yes, Ms. Martin.
can I get clarification from Jesse? Is it item 8 on the list or item 10 on the list? Because he said both. You're muted, Jesse.
Sorry, item 10 and then not 9, 10, 9.
9 and 10?
No, just 10. And then there are 2 items under that, paragraph 8 and paragraph 9. It's paragraph 9.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Garcia, you have your hand up?
Yes, sir. So going back to my original comment of our quality of life meeting where we made the recommendation to have one street open, and it's not in this amendment. So once again, we want that in writing. We want not part of cruise night. We want it broken out specifically that one street will be open. My follow-up to that is because I think our logic behind that was if San Francisco Street closed, then Palace would open up. So my question is there an ordinance in place that shut down Palace Avenue? Because Palace, from my experience in history, that it's shut down permanently right now. We've got barricades, permanent barricades in place. So do we have legislation that keeps Palace Avenue closed permanently?
Jesse.
Mr. Council, I'm not aware of that. I don't know how that street was closed. I don't know what authorized it.
Because, thank you, Jesse, I appreciate that, because if that's the case, and if we don't know, then I think we do need to make the recommendation and specifically state what street we want open. Because if we pass this, then that leaves only 3 other streets to be open: San Francisco, Washington, and Santa Fe Trail, if I'm not mistaken. I think, like I said, our logic behind keeping one street open was if San Francisco closed, Palace would open. So I think we need to clarify that if we can, and I hate to put you under the gun, but you put us under the gun in this meeting, we need to find out, because we need to put this amendment in the language today.
So Councilor Garcia, if we were to approve this, you could work with Jesse tomorrow on additional amendment sheet similar to what Councilor Villarreal has just done, and include it as an amendment from you that you specifically want Palace or Lincoln, whatever street you think is appropriate.
Okay.
You still have the floor, Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I know last meeting and we talked about a traffic study, and we mentioned, I think John mentioned that San Francisco Street gets something like 1,700 vehicles down that street a day. So I didn't get follow-up in what other streets traffic was. Because if we consider that a major artery and we begin to close it, how much are we going to divert traffic through the surrounding streets? And how are we going to deal with that increased traffic on the smaller streets?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia. So again, I wouldn't consider it to be a major artery into the downtown area from a traffic volume standpoint. You're right, it's about 1,700 cars a day. Sandoval's 7,000. Other streets, Old Pecos Trail, a 2-lane road, the portion from Cordova to St. Michael's Drive is close to 15,000. St. Francis Cerrillos are in the 40,000 car range. So short of doing a study of the entire downtown area, I do not think that redistribution of that 1,700 cars would cause significant traffic delays in the surrounding streets.
So if we shut down a street that gets 17,000 vehicles per day, you don't think there's going to be congestion on side streets?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, it's 1,700, 1,700, and no, I do not.
I find that hard to believe, to be, especially when our streets aren't your typical 2-lane roads. There are a lot of one-way traffic roads downtown Santa Fe. And to divert 1,700 cars in a different direction, I would like to guarantee that it's not going to cause congestion, and other businesses aren't going to be able to be frequented, because it just adds to another challenge of frequenting downtown. So I know that you said 1,700. How come we can't get the number for the remainder of the streets downtown? And I'm not asking for the arteries specifically, but the smaller streets: Shelby, Don Gaspar, Water, Washington. What is the frequency of traffic on those streets?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, any kind of data is obtainable. We don't maintain that data on a yearly basis. My staff does not do that. So what I did is I looked at one of the most recent traffic studies that was done in the area. It was the Lenzik Hotel proposal, and they did count the intersection of Sandoval and San Francisco. So that's why I was able to get those volumes and compare them. To do the other ones, right now, to be honest, I don't have staff. In the matter of 2 weeks, my traffic staff is going to be down to 0 people. So I won't be able to get that data within a reasonable amount of time.
Okay, well, I think it's information that we need when we're making critical decisions like this, and it doesn't help when we just don't have that information in front of us. That's all the questions I have right now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia. Councilor Vihil Coppler, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just say I'm in favor of keeping one street open. I'm wondering though, however this goes, one of the questions I had was about, these stores that they're talking about the loud traffic noises, and that I guess there's more time spent that I can see, not necessarily that they think that they're pedestrian, that they'll get more buyers in their stores, but that there's problems with the noise. But going back to the stores, are we going to allow them to put like clothes racks on the street? And what are the rules about that? If the street's closed in front of their shops, will they be allowed, like the restaurants will, to put tables and such? Will they be allowed to take their clothes and clothes racks? And is that going to happen?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, that has not been contemplated. My understanding of the intent of this is not only to provide additional outside dining space, but to provide a larger common area for pedestrians. So that way we can spread out the pedestrians and they're not all piled up on our narrow sidewalks.
Well, it wasn't too long ago that there was a store on the plaza that put up a tent on the plaza and took their wares out under the tent without a permit. So, is there anything in this resolution or these ordinance change, whatever this is, because I'm still getting used to Prime Gov. Is there anything that prevents that from happening?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, I think if there is concern about that and you'd want to prevent that, that is language that you can suggest to be added to the resolution. Regarding the tent that's been placed by the plaza, they're not necessarily selling their wares. They were handing out face masks. So my office did permit that. And my justification was I felt it was a legitimate public service that was not being accommodated at the time downtown. So I thought it was reasonable to approve that.
Okay, thank you for that. But I understand they did it and then they got reported and then they asked for a permit, but that's neither here nor there. But I think we should look at this from all angles, because I mean, if restaurants are allowed to put tables and sell their wares, which would be food and alcohol, what would prevent a store owner from going to your office and saying, I want to put my clothes outside? I mean, I guess you would have to do it on a case-by-case basis unless we disallowed it.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, that's correct. If you wanted to disallow a certain use of our right-of-way, that would definitely be within your purview, and I think it would be good to clarify that in this resolution.
Because some of these people that were citing, you know, let's make the plaza like 16th Street Mall, like Europe. I mean, I've been to 16th Street Mall in Denver, and it's a bunch of clothes out on the sidewalks. And I think we need to be prepared. I mean, fine. But one of the other questions I have, does this expire October 31st?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, yes.
Okay. Because I am not interested in it going any further than that, for sure. Okay, the next thing is, what streets are we talking about? Because we've all gotten all the emails about Marcy Street, Don Gasper, Sheridan, not Sheridan, Shelby. But you know, Shelby Street, I think the New Mexico Finance Authority is in that building, and that would block off their parking. So you might want to think about that, but I don't really know what are the streets?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, the streets that we've received interest for are San Francisco Street from Sandoval to Old Santa Fe Trail, Don Gasper between Water Street and San Francisco Street, Marcy Street between Lincoln and Washington, and then Shelby Street. Those are the only streets that I've received interest in my office.
Well, okay, so you might want to check on Shelby because that is the New Mexico Finance Authority office. So how are you going to decide? Who's going to decide?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, it would be decided by my office through their obstruction permit. Right now, the obstruction permit allows my office to make these decisions by ordinance. We do so on a typical basis. Most of the time, permits to obstruct right-of-way are more for construction-related issues, whether it's on connecting utilities, putting in HVAC systems using cranes, staging areas for construction projects on private property. So right now, my office has the responsibility of evaluating them, determining what's safe from a public standpoint, determining what traffic impacts it's going to have, and then making a decision accordingly.
So if you closed San Francisco Street from Sandoval, how would we get in the garage?
From this, Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihil Coppler, I apologize if I misstated it. It would be from the Sandoval garage to Old Santa Fe Trail. So you'd be able to go in and out of the Sandoval garage, but only be able to go in and out towards Sandoval Road itself.
Okay, so then let's get to the noise of the cars. You know, I'm just like, well, you know, that's a right for people to drive their cars, but I think we have a noise ordinance and I think we have police department. And so why not make it part of this resolution that we will have police presence on the plaza? So when we don't close one of the streets, we have a presence where maybe we can deter some of that action and try to appease the store owners who are really complaining about the noise. I mean, what would be wrong with that? That would be community policing.
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Vihil Coppler, again, I think if you wanted to propose that as an amendment to the document, you can do that with Jesse, and then we would have opportunity to discuss it at governing body.
Okay. And then probably the other thing, because, you know, this is an issue for our community, people who live here. You've all gotten the emails. about closing the street, San Francisco Street specifically. And if the store owners think that pedestrian traffic will increase their sales, I would be interested in getting gross receipts reports from them on a monthly basis to see if this really indeed is increasing their sales, or on some periodic basis. Because I'm not sure that foot traffic has anything to do with the sales. Maybe it does, but closing the street is, whatever streets they are, I would like to know if that really increases sales. Because that's the whole reason these 75% business owners apparently want to close the street. So, I mean, let's see if that's really, what it's meant to be for them. I'm not sure, but perhaps I can work with Councilor Garcia in amendments. Would that be okay, Councilor Garcia?
Yes, Councilor.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is it.
Thank you, Councilor Viejo Coppler. Councilor Beta, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Viejo Coppler brought up some really good points and got me thinking, especially about the other types of businesses, not just restaurants. And I think we probably need to have the land use weigh in on the amendments that come before, or that Councilor Viejo Coppler and Councilor Garcia come up with. Maybe we don't need amendments because there's land use rules that would prohibit racks of clothes from coming out onto the sidewalk. I don't know. But my concern is, as we start trying to make amendments at the last minute into this resolution, what if we missed something? So I think we can try it that way, but it'd be good to have land use weigh in. As far as the amendment for 10 on page 3(9), I agree with my other members of the committee. That does not say that one street should always be open. And I don't even think you can even get that intent from the way the language is written. It says the city manager shall designate cruise days and times during which at least one street bordering the plaza shall be accessible. So that tells me that you only have to have one street bordering the plaza accessible when there's been a designated cruise day or night. So however, whatever language we can come up with to make that clear that there will always be one available, that's what I would like to see also, because I think that we should always have vehicular access to our plaza, regardless of whether or not it's a cruise day or designated cruise time. Maybe we need to send this on to the council without a recommendation, because I would like to see the amendments that Councilor Viejo Coppler and Councilor Garcia come up with first. And hopefully we have much more information and more staff available if we do indeed hear this tomorrow night at council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Beta. And well, Jesse, you have your hand up. Go ahead, Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor, I just want to mention that in an initial draft of the resolutions for Councilor Villarreal, I did have a specific number that did say at least one street along the plaza should remain open at all times. So that did get deleted along the way. So that was my apologies. And we can add that back in if someone wants to do that, or I can add it to Councilor Villarreal since it was part of her amendment originally.
Councilor Garcia, is that something you were going to address?
Yeah, but a quick question though, because I'm looking at the amendments and the numbers don't even line up. So in the proposed amendment to item 10, you're referring to item 8 and 9, whereas there's not even an item 8 or 9 in the original resolution. Can you clarify that for me, Jesse?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, if you look at the wording of the amendment, it says on page 3, line 24, insert the following new paragraphs. So they are new paragraphs.
Oh, okay, so, but I think item 9 is already addressed in item 6, correct? You're actually cross-referencing it and making it one street less, whereas in item 6, all streets. says all streets should be open during cruise nights. And then with that proposed change number 9, it's kicking it down to number 10. So they would be in an automatic conflict. Am I reading this incorrectly?
So if I can jump in here real quick, clearly we haven't had time to look through the proposed changes, the proposed amendments. There are additional amendments that need to be made. I agree with Councilor Abeyta that we should probably move this forward without a recommendation. It'll give us time between now and the council meeting to review all the changes and where they fit and how they fit. And it'll allow Councilor Garcia, Councilor Vigil-Koppler to propose additional changes if they feel that they need to be done. And we can hopefully have a much better packet when we get to the full council meeting.
Mr. Chair, councilors, it probably would have been easier for me to show the red line of the resolution. I do apologize. So number 6 on the existing resolution should be deleted, and then in place of that it should say the city manager shall designate cruise nights and times.
Yeah, I think red line would be a lot better than well getting it at the last minute and then trying to figure out how it all fits together. So that's the reasoning for agreeing with Councilor Abeyta to let's move this forward without a recommendation. Again, it's going forward anyway because it passed quality of life committee, so it's going to move forward to the governing body, but our committee could move it forward without a recommendation until we have ample time to review it. Councilor Lindell, you have your hand up.
Yeah, a couple of things. I am going to make a motion that we move this forward without a recommendation with the request that we get a red line of the amendments by no later than noon on Wednesday. That's not part of the motion, that's a request, but the motion is that we move this forward without a recommendation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion by Councilor Lindell, second by Councilor Abeyta. Discussion, Councilor Vigil-Koppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would hope that we could put something in Councilor Lindell's motion where we give our reason for moving it forward without a recommendation. I think we should say that for time to consider amendments, because that way other councilors who aren't on this committee, as well as the public, understand that we're not just willy-nilly, not even discussing it. I think we should have a reason in the motion. So I would ask Councilor Lindell and her second, Councilor Abeyta, to consider that.
Councilor Lindell, is that a friendly?
I'm not opposed to that. And I think that Councilor Vigil-Koppler makes a good point so that the public doesn't think that we just moved it forward without a recommendation because we didn't have any position on it. I think we all have a position on it. We just are not able to consider the amendments that we're being asked to consider in addition to what is already existing. So that's fine to have amend that motion to say we can move it forward without a recommendation due to inadequate time to consider the proposed amendments.
I agree, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Abeyta, you're okay with that?
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
All right, Jesse, one last comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I just wanted to make a note in terms of Councilor Lindell's request that we have it to you by noon on Wednesday. If you do have other proposed amendments, please get those to me as soon as possible so that I can work those in to a red line as well as an actual amendment.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir.
I think,
Counselor Ramonda Beta,
yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Joanne Vio Coppler,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Counselor Christopher Rivera.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. All right. Thank you for the discussion. We're on to our last item, item K, which was pulled by Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question on this in terms of the math of it's 240, but the way that I read this, it was a 4-year contract and the annual bid was, I believe, 44,500. I'm not really exactly sure how we got to the 240. You're on mute, Chair.
Chairman, Councilor Lindell, this is the TLC paving, or the citywide paving.
No, this is on the dam vegetation.
Excuse me. Yes, ma'am. The issue was discussed in water fairly strenuously within the last week and a half. The bid was actually just used to choose the presumptive winner, and the $200,000 per year is the money that's been set aside to do the work that OSC is requiring the city to do to maintain the dams in a safe and orderly fashion.
Well, thank you, but it doesn't really answer my question. We're approving an amount of 240,000 over the course of 4 years, but the amount bid comes out to 178,000. So I've got a, let's see, I've got a $62,000 discrepancy in monies.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Lindell, the bid prices that were given were not necessarily for the work that is exactly needing to be done. They were to show a relative approximation that we figured would be utilized typically at the time that the package was put together. Since then, the ideas that Source of Supply has and OSC has for having it cleaned is what we were going to be using to actually task order Bosque Natural to do the work to clean it. It's not a guaranteed amount for Bosque Natural. That's more of a cap per year that we could spend. And I have not seen yet a proposed work order for phase 1, which would be the initial set of work that they would do this fall.
I'm still not getting there as to why I'm seeing a bid from a group over the course of 4 years. It's 178, and we're being asked to approve 240. Considering what we're facing with a budget right now, I'm not inclined to add extra money to be spent away from what the actual bid was. And if we don't know what they were bidding, or we didn't ask them the proper thing to bid, let's go back and figure out what it is we really need.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Lindell, the bid is more like the citywide construction contract or the citywide asphalt or citywide pavement remediation contract, in that we ask for rates for typical work that could be done under the contract, not for specific rates for work that will be done under the contract. And the amount that you would be approving would be a cap for the work that could be done in each year, assuming that we tasked Bosque Natural to do that work. We did not have a pre-planned agenda that you shall cut 15 trees greater than 8 inches in diameter, 25 trees between 8 inches and 3 inches. You should mow this or fertilize that. We were looking for typical price ranges for all of the work that might be done over the next 4 years. That was used to come up with the $44,000 bid, which doesn't have anything to do with work that will actually be done other than the dollar amounts for each bid item would be held for the 4 years to do whatever it is that's required.
Mr. Jones, you had your hand up earlier. Is there something you want to add to that?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, I was just hoping to just elaborate on what Mr. Hugh is saying. When the bids are put out, there's typical tasks that are done and there's estimated quantities that are included in the bid. Then when the bids are totalized to determine who's the lowest bid is for the award of the contract. So this particular firm was the lowest bid based on those estimated quantities. The amount of the contract is a decision from the Water Division of about investing $60,000 a year or $240,000 over the next 40 years. Over the next 4 years into the vegetation management on the dams. Some of that work, right, is mandated by the Dam Safety Bureau. It's work that we're going to have to do. And I think where Mr. Hughes is trying to go is based on the money that's available and the actual specific tasks that have to be done during that work. What's variable is how many square feet or cubic yards is actually done. So I think the intent of the contract is about the level of investment for each year that we believe through the course of the contract for the 4 years gets us back into a better standing on the reservoir, not specific deliverables for a price. And so hopefully that helps a little bit.
I'll yield the floor, Chair.
All right, are there any other questions on item K? What are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval by Councilor Vihil Coppler, a second by Councilor Beta. Any further discussion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Signe Lindell,
I'm going to vote no for a lack of clarity on how the packet is presented.
Councilor Joanne Vihil Coppler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Christopher Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we're on to items from staff. Anything from your side, John?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we received a bit of good news today. It looks like all of our appropriations from 19 and 20 legislative appropriations, we're going to be able to retain. We got a notice that some of them they had to reconfigure to pay for from bond proceeds as opposed to the general fund. But it looks like we will be able to retain all those appropriations.
That is great news. Thank you, John. Anything from you, Mr. Jones?
There's nothing, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Matters from the committee.
Councilor Counselor Vihil Coppler has her hand up.
Counselor Vihel Coppler.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I wanted to ask John, I know, I think it was the last meeting, you said you were the only engineer left. And I know the city is in a hiring freeze. And so what are you going to do about that? I don't think that, I'm not sure how you're going to proceed. I would like to know.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vihel Coppler, I'm working with finance and HR to justify advertising of those positions. They understand the criticalness of it, so I believe we will work to incorporate filling of certain positions, including those ones, in our budget proposal. One of the difficulties, it might have been mentioned before, is not only the financial straits we're in right now, but prior to that, it was very difficult to recruit engineers. I had several positions advertised multiple times and did not receive any people on my list of eligibles. The one that's especially hard to fill is the traffic engineer position. It is a position that always has to manage a lot of difficult issues. Traffic's an issue that everybody has an opinion on, and especially land use related issues. It's very challenging. So I think there's a lot of people that aren't up to the challenge. And so we're hoping to get some if we can advertise these positions.
Well, maybe it'll be better now because with the pandemic and people being out of work, maybe you will be lucky this time, hopefully. But I fully support you getting the help you need because all the projects that this committee and the council have approved, even tonight, I worry about how we're going to get those things done if you don't have any engineers to help you. So I wish you well. Thank you.
Again, I can't see everyone on the screen. So Councilor Beta, do you have anything?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Councilor Lindell, do you have anything?
No, thank you, Chair.
Councilor Garcia?
No, not tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Matters from the chair, I have no matters. So our next meeting is July 6th. Unless there's anything pressing, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.